On our discussion tonight, how do we get Kenya moving forward now that the elections are over? And joining me in studio to my immediate right is Kiprono Kitoni. He is the chairman of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And next to him is Patrick Obath, the vice chairman of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance Foundation. And you're both welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So obviously we all want to live in a society where we each feel we have a stake. The economy is growing and we're growing with it. And that hasn't necessarily been the experience of a lot of Kenyans. So now in a post-election Kenya, what are your concerns going forward regarding the economic growth and inclusivity? Kiprono.
First of all, let me say that as business in Kenya, we are quite excited by the prospect of a concluded election with a clear winner. Obviously, there are some grievances on the part of the opposition. It was a very closely contested election. And I think as a country, we have made very significant steps forward in terms of our democratic process. We are the only country in the region that has a working democracy. We have had now, I think this is the 4th multi-party election, and we are ushering in the 12th parliament. And for me, I think the fact that we concluded it, obviously there have been some skirmishes up and about, but by and large, I want to say that going forward, we have actually ticked another very important milestone in terms of our democratic credentials, in terms of being a society that will be able to rely on its institutions like the IEBC to deliver a verdict, to be able to tell those who are aggrieved by the process, including the NASA Alliance, including many other candidates across the political divide, who will be taking their cases to court, that we have a working judiciary. And I think personally that as a country we will become a really desired investment destination because of the fact that we've gone through this process and we've gone through it successfully.
So would your concern then be around dispute resolution?
I think more than anything else, you see President Kenyatta goes into his 2nd term, and you know, the country is deeply divided. We have about 45% that didn't vote for him and that voted for the opposition. And I think that he has an opportunity to provide a legacy of a united Kenya. And I think personally that you know, one of the cornerstones of the way Kenya will look tomorrow will be the agenda of inclusivity. For the past 54 odd years, the country has been led by two tribes, and we cannot sweep that under the carpet. There is 40 tribes waiting to have an opportunity at the leadership. But I think it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to have the ultimate prize to be included. And I do believe that in the next government that we're going to see formed by President Kenyatta, that all the communities of Kenya will be included.
Patrick, why does business nearly always ground to a standstill in Kenya during an election period? And is this the same throughout Africa, or is this quite peculiar?
I think there's certain peculiarities we have in Kenya. If you look at the history of elections, they're always held during holiday periods, apart from one. Right? They used to be December, and now it is August. So as part of the way we are as Kenyans, we go home on holidays, and August and December are holiday months. So definitely we'll find that there will be a lull within the cities at that time. And this time we've seen exactly the same thing. People have gone up country, and they'll probably come back after a week, 2 weeks, and so forth. Part of them went up to vote, and they're back. The other part went up to vote and have a holiday, and they're still there, and that happens everywhere. And I think that's peculiar to Kenya. In other parts of the world, you basically have a system whereby you have a day off to vote and you're back to work.
Do we just need a holiday?
I think given the way we've been running our elections, I think we need that day off. But also, if you look at the demographics of our voters, a lot of our voters have registered their votes in their home areas. So they have to travel back to their home areas. But with devolution now coming in, I think our voters have to start thinking about, where does my vote count most? Is it where my shags or my home area, where I'm probably only there for a total of 1 month in a year? Or does it count where I'm actually working and living, where I am for 11 months to, almost most of the year? And I think as people begin to realize that devolution brings that decision closer to where they are, they probably move their votes closer to where they work.
So you wouldn't say that there is also an overwhelming concern for, Kenyan safety, that perhaps lose businesses? That there are many other factors that contribute to that?
There are other factors, I think. Okay. Safety was an issue, and I think from 2007 we had the worst case. People were caught unawares, And since then, Kenyans are getting better and better at predicting what is going to happen. And we've had all these campaigns to sort of try and ensure that we have peaceful elections. And I think, by and large, we're winning from that point of view.
Kipora, can politics and business be separated? And would that be a good thing?
You see, politics determines how the country is governed. And in Kenya now we have a GDP of close to $71 billion US. The Kenya Revenue Authority today is collecting close to 1.4 trillion shillings every year. So the stakes are extremely high. We have perhaps one of the most robust economies. It's a highly diversified economy. And for that reason, you see the resources of any country are distributed by Parliament, with Senate having oversight mandates. We also have devolution with 47 counties taking a large chunk of those resources and applying them for development and recurrent expenditure at the grassroots level. So, in my opinion, not anywhere, I mean everywhere in the world, politics and business cannot be separated. Business is an integral part of politics because we form the taxpayer class, and it is through businesses that the government are able to collect revenue to drive their development agenda. But back to the question, if you would allow me, on why we must grind to a halt for this period of time. I think as business, it is very important that, and we really are hoping that before the next election, a referendum will be held to really address some of the crucial issues in the Constitution that require redressing. I feel strongly, and we've consulted with many of our stakeholders in the Chamber of Fraternity, that the election would best be held in the month of December, which is typically the holiday month, so that people can go home and vote and allow the country that healing process. We are still suffering very much from the 2008, I actually say, Patrick, it's 2008, not 2007.
Right.
Because the election was in 2007, the trouble was in 2008. And in 2008, we had 300 billion shillings worth of assets destroyed. We lost tourism revenue of up to 91 billion shillings. So many people have that concern. There was a hangover. They're thinking that tomorrow the worst is going to happen. But I think as a country we have a working democracy, we have a good security system, and we are proving that our democracy is coming of age. Right.
So we're moving forward even to the extent that figures in terms of Kenya's economic slowdown from 1% have been revised downwards to between 0.2 and 0.5%. Patrick, what is that dependent on going forward?
Those figures are and you see that it's been revised downward for a very good reason. One, the flight of capital that you used to see from the stock exchange is now no longer there. If you look at the economic indicators, the exchange rate has been fairly stable, right? It's just taken a small dip recently, but that is more in response to the play of international currencies. If you look at our inflation rate, that has come down. So, all in all, when you look at that, the economy has been very, very stable, and we don't expect that because of the elections that have happened now, that those indicators are going to change significantly. The one thing that has really...
Would protests change that?
Pardon?
Would protests change that?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Because the biggest changes that were happening was people were taking money out of the stock exchange and going out. And that capital flight has not happened. The big investments that normally happen here are still going on. Just last week, there was a signing for the new expressway between Mombasa and Nairobi, right? That is an investment that is going to become a toll road. Those guys expect a return. So they're investing on a 20-25-year project in this country. So in terms of people having confidence in the economy, we are confident that people are coming in.
So when the opposition leader says, don't go back to work, what would your immediate concerns as business be? Is it purely just that, businesses will not be operational, or is there also that long-term effect of investors perhaps hedging now their bets, thinking twice about Kenya?
It's not going to happen that way. I think Kenyans have grown beyond killing their own economy, right? Let's not even talk about external investors. It's just our own people in Kenya. If they don't go to do their normal activities during the day, they are the ones who suffer themselves. And I think that the idea of trying to get Kenyans involved in politics at the expense of business is becoming a weaker and weaker activity within this country.
Yeah, before I came into studio, I sent a WhatsApp message to business leaders in all 47 counties of Kenya and asked them, what is the state of business in Kenya today? Was there any impact from the don't go back to work call by the head of the opposition? And actually, in every corner of Kenya, apart from in Kisumu, I received a positive response that everybody's back to work. If you were in Nairobi today, we saw by the traffic, we had 90% turnout in our offices. A few people in the hinterland are still struggling with public transport to get back into Nairobi. And I think as a country, we must remember that we are held to a higher responsibility. Kenya is the hub of this region economically, and our port in Mombasa serves 4 other countries in the region. So really, any day that we are losing, not going to work, is a day lost of GDP, is a day lost of business opportunity, and it's a day lost for Kenyans to earn their livelihoods.
And what's the report from Kisumu?
The report from Kisumu is that there were still some shops not opened, and the levels of tension were a bit higher. And I've asked the chairman of the chamber in Kisumu to go out tomorrow actively and get people to go back to work. We've been a go back to work call, and it's very important, not just for us. It's important for our economy, and it's important for our own ability to earn a livelihood. Okay.
Patrick, what would you say, what is your reading of the overall security situation in the country, how police are handling it, and how that affects or impacts business confidence?
I think the police have a very important role in this country. One is to protect lives. Secondly, it is to protect property, people's property. And Kenya is a signatory to the United Nations use of force rules. And by and large, those rules are known. And you probably find that some of people in the police force may not necessarily operate by those rules right down to the letter. But what we've seen so far, and in fact leading up to the period prior to the elections, you find that the police in this country have changed drastically. There are people who actually now they'll escort people who are going to protest and march, compared to last year or maybe early last year when effectively they were seen as people who, when you see them, you run away and start throwing stones at them. Now they're escorting people who are doing peaceful marches and protecting them from the other people who are coming in. And I think that over the last few days they've exercised a reasonable amount of restraint when faced with what they've been faced with. And unfortunately, within our country, people take advantage of any crowd gathered to start doing malfeasances around where they are. Shops have been broken into, not because people are protesting, it's because people are looting. And the protesters then get caught up in this thing when the police are trying to do their job, and the people who are innocently trying to make protests are caught in the middle of that. And I think it's up to us to start doing public education around what you need to do in the event that your event is hijacked by other people. The police can only respond to what they see. And if you happen to be caught in the middle of that, unfortunately, they can't tell who is who.
Right.
Right. And that is a difficult thing for them. And I appreciate that they really need to, they have a role to play, and we make it difficult for them to play that role.
Kiprana, how do you feel about protests if we have a critical mass of Kenyans going on the streets to express their displeasure in this spoil? Will that affect business?
I think, Anne, that protests are an integral part of a working democracy. And so long as people are operating within the confines of the 4 walls of the law, there's absolutely nothing wrong with protests. I think the police are today, I would say, operating in a very difficult situation, because there's a very thin line between, a legitimate protester who has followed due process to get authorization to conduct their protest, and criminals who then take advantage, of the situation to conduct criminal activity. And for that reason, we've seen different figures being bandied, or the statistic of how many lives have been lost with the police. I think this morning saying there are 9 lives that have been lost. With civil society, on the other hand, talking about much different numbers, and also members of the opposition, giving different conflicting figures. But I think that as a country, we really need to ensure that our police forces don't use excessive force. I mean, we have seen the case of the girl in Mathare who lost her life to a stray bullet. And obviously the question that comes to mind is, why would a live bullet be used in a situation where we have enough equipment to quell riots? But I think that, legitimate demonstrations, legitimate protesting is an integral part of any working democracy, and it's not something that we should not discourage. We should allow people to ventilate their grievances, and we should also allow people, in the event that they have greater grievances, to take the recourse of the judicial system.
As business leaders, you'd obviously be concerned by the governance environment, and Jubilee walks into both houses of parliament and the Council of Governors with a supermajority, making it that much more difficult for opposition to check on them. What are your thoughts on that, and how would you want to see Jubilee use its numbers in the House?
I think in the last two parliaments, as a business community, we have developed a very healthy relationship with originally the parliament, and now with the two houses, Senate as well. And the way we work with those the august body is to deal with the parliamentary committees. Now, when you have parliamentary committees, there's a mix of people in those parliamentary committees from both the opposition and from the government. At that level, you have a very, very robust and good discussion. Right? And we have had some very good legislation coming through as a result of the space that was opened up, especially when the constitution was changed, and we had some, some new people coming into parliament. So I do not expect that opportunity of dialogue is going to be diluted, right? Even though they've got a majority, it's only a question of where there is a difference, a disagreement on direction, that it has to go there. But by and large, if you can work well with the parliamentary committees, both in Senate and in Parliament, we don't think that the tyranny of numbers, as people try to call it, will be a hindrance. Right? It will be an opportunity, in fact, because if you get the discussions right at the committee stage, then it will sail through much easier from that point of view.
Right.
And my view on that is, that, frankly speaking, I don't think that the performance of the 11th Parliament was very inspiring. And I think the Jubilee government has a new opportunity, particularly in President Kenyatta's second term and final term, to demonstrate what he made a commitment on during his campaign on the fight against corruption. I think that the superiority of numbers, the tyranny of numbers that they command today, actually gives President Kenyatta an excellent opportunity to demonstrate his commitment to the fight against corruption. And I think there's no other more important institution in making sure that is successful than Parliament itself, because Parliament has a full legislative capacity to take this country in the direction that they would like. So I think personally that it provides him an excellent opportunity to create a legacy of both a country that is cohesive and a country that is completely committed to fight against the scourge of corruption.
So you've talked about cohesion and corruption. Are there other priority areas for the business community?
One of the other priority areas, of course, is to see a working devolution. I think the government of Kenya has done incredibly well in terms of deploying infrastructure. Infrastructure allows for the free movement of goods and services, and devolution is a key aspect. It's a cornerstone of the 2010 Constitution. And I think that having working county governments is going to be very important in terms of delivering services to Wananchi at the county level. The other aspect, of course, is we've seen Kenya Revenue Authority do a fantastic job in terms of stakeholder engagement, and the Kenya Revenue Authority continues to be an important institution in terms of delivering on that agenda. So I think more public participation would be needed in terms of legislative processes, both at the county level and at the national level, to see that the decisions of all the stakeholders are brought on board, and obviously to look at how we would, as a business community, we are very concerned about our balance of trade. 45% of Kenya's GDP comprised of trading activities, both locally and internationally. And we need to see that Kenya becomes more competitive, particularly in its export agenda. The Ministry of Industrialization has been come up with a National Industrial Master Plan, but we also need to see exports at the center of that master plan.
Patrick, there are those who would be watching and saying that this is the macro business to which we are not part of, does not affect us, whether it moves forward or back. The 0.5% has nothing to do with me. Yeah. I don't feel it in my pocket. How do you reconcile these two groups?
I think there's the bit where you're producing, you're manufacturing, and you're doing the big things. Then there is what you call the distribution network, and at the lower level. And I think we need to get our act together in terms of managing the full value chain, and which allows the smaller people to play their part, in terms of people who are growing things in the farms, for example, and being able to bring them into collection centers and then put them into manufacturing, value addition, and then putting it into our own market. And I think if we can get our economy to be able to feed itself, where we actually add value locally, which we then consume in Kenya and are able to then export into the region, I think that would be a big win for the country that will actually ensure that everybody within the value chain actually gets value out of it. Currently, we are spending a lot of money in terms of importing things for consumption, right? That money that you're spending to import things for consumption is better invested in Kenya to actually add value in Kenya. And I think the other thing that we need to look at is that there's a lot of, if you look at the youth bulge that we have in the country, where can we tap them to work in? And I believe that there's two main areas. One is in sports, which we don't actually consider to be an income-earning activity. We could actually change that drastically. And the other one is basically in the creative economy. We've got very, very talented people, and getting people started up in the creative economy and in sports is very, very low investment, because what you need is talent rather than big capital investment. And they can then generate a lot of income either through exporting their creativity outside, or in terms of just making sport a big business in here and as an export opportunity.
And so, I suppose you'd like to see government invest in those areas.
Yes, very much so.
Yes, having said that though, as we wind up, how do we move Kenya collectively, all of us forward, regardless of which side people voted on? To have 6 million plus people disagree with an administration is a significant figure. You can't wish that away. And there are people who may be going back to work and saying, look, I really don't feel it. I was waiting for Canaan, as it were, and that hasn't happened. How do you motivate everybody to still feel that they have a significant stake in the direction in which the country is going and to play their part?
And let me just very briefly, before I respond to that, speak briefly about the GDP decline of 0.4% that we talked about. For me, I think there's two solutions to it. One is we need to harness our water resources to drive our agricultural agenda. Actually, half of that, 50% of that GDP decline is occasioned by the prolonged drought that we've had, and the slowdown in the credit regime because of the banking cap on the banking interest. And I think as a country we need to revisit those two issues. How are we going to harness our water resources to enhance agricultural productivity, which is still the mainstay of our economy? Secondly, on the interest capping, yes, it worked. I mean, the banks were tamed, so to speak, but then it has also led to a withdrawal of credit from the public. And so we need to actually revisit that. Is it still the best way forward to have banking under an interest rate cap? So I think we need to revisit those two issues. But in terms of how we move forward as a country, I would like to suggest that healing is a process, not an event. The election is an event that has been concluded. And I think it behoves upon us as a country, the entire leadership class, the entire citizenry, to work on the agenda of healing. That is when all stakeholders need to be brought to the table, the religious groupings, business community, civil society, the political leadership. We actually need to have a national conference to look at how we can take this country to a full process of healing.
Right. Patrick, 6 million people feeling that they're out in the cold.
I think let us look at the population of Kenya that actually needs services from the government. 6 million people, one side, 8 million people, a total of 15 million people out of a population of 45 million people. Those were people exercising a right to vote. But really, what matters in this country, and we need to start thinking carefully about that, is that voting is a process which is finished and gone. But what we now need to advocate for, and the 6 million people need to start advocating for, is we need service. Just like the other 8 million.
Right.
The electoral process does not deliver for me service. It's the government that is in place to deliver service. So what we should be going back to is not trying to work out who is who. What we're going to say is we've got a government that has been put into place. Let us demand our services from that government, irrespective of who is there. And those services are for the 45 million Kenyans. From the children who are being born, they require services at that point in time, right to the elderly people who are sort of in their 90s. That whole spectrum of people require one service or another that has got to be delivered by the government from the taxes that we pay. So I think we need a mindset change that 6 million or 8 million people, that was purely an election to elect our leaders. Whichever leaders we have now, we should change around and say, we are going to hold you accountable to deliver on your manifesto.
All right, and I thank you both for your views. We're taking a short break and we're back after this.